Dear students, today our COIL session will once again focus on developing cross-cultural skills. The key question of the lecture is the following: how to learn to understand the kaleidoscope of cultures and program your mind to interact with them efficiently and as quickly as possible. Much literature has been written illustrating cross-cultural mistakes in international business relations. Long list of mistakes are accompanied by a list of recommendations and taboo for business people working abroad. However, they cannot cover everything, and the list of intercultural mistakes continue to grow because there is a lack of understanding not so much of what is specific to one or another culture, but of what is the cause of cultural differences. So, for your attention, the topic: cultural programming. This lecture includes the following content on such matters. First, Hofstede levels of cultural programming. The second, typical reaction on unfamiliar cultures. Third, interaction with other cultures, models of culture shock. Theory of adaptation along the U-shaped curve by Sverre Lysgaard. Model for managing anxiety and insanity by Gudykunst. Transition model by Bennett, and communication system model by Jan Kim. And the last question of our lecture will be from national culture to organizational culture, correlation between them. In previous lesson, you already met Geert Hofstede, the author of studies on intercultural communication and of organizational behavior, who calls culture the software of the mind. Culture, like DOS or Unis for Windows, it is what allows us to process information in very specific application programs. The metaphor Windows is very attractive in the description of culture. Culture is a set of windows existing in our consciousness through which we look at the surrounding reality. We look out the window and see the world differently. Studies show that different cultures give rise to different thinking styles, different attitudes towards oneself and one's role in society, and even different syndromes. Yes, in many respects we are very similar. Food security are constant needs for us. However, the culture of the country also affects our processes of cognition, perception, and individuality. In order to confirm the different vision of the world for each of us as the representatives of different cultures, I suggest answering a simple test: panda, monkey, banana. Which of the above makes a pair? On this slide, you can see the result of the test. Respondents from Western countries usually cross out the banana, because the panda and monkey are animals. This is how analytical thinking works. And the interviewers from Eastern countries combine a monkey and a banana. This is how holistic type of thinking works, which perceives the objects and the context as a single whole. This demonstrates the difference in style of thinking, and therefore emphasizes the peculiarity of cultural programming. This and other differences were successfully described by Hofstede. As a reminder of the material of previous lectures, this slide. 6 dimensions of national culture. The first dimension is the power distance index. This is a degree of acceptance and expectation of social equality by less powerful and influential strata of society. The second dimension is individualism and collectivism. Individualistic cultures prefer weak social structures, where individuals have to take care of themselves and their loved ones. Collectivism is an instinct structure of society where individuals expect their relatives and friends to take care of them in return to total loyalty. In the word I or we. The third dimension is masculinity or femininity. Masculinity is a dominance of success, heroism, persistence, and material use for success. Such a society is more competitive. And femininity is cooperation, modesty, caring of the weak, and quality of life. Feminist society is based on consciousness. The fourth dimension is the index of uncertainty avoidance, describes the extent to which members of society are worried about uncertainty and uncertainty of the future. In society trying to control the future or just accepting it. The fifth dimension is long-term or short-term orientation. Societies treat it differently. A low score of these dimensions indicates support for established traditions and norms suspicious of social changes. A high indicator indicates pragmatism, the possibility of explaining everything that is happening. And the sixth dimension is satisfaction and retention. Contentment indicates free access to the satisfaction on basic human instincts related to life's pleasures and entertainment. Abstinence is a separation of the needs and regulation by strict social norms. Such categories are useful because they help managers to simplify their organizational world, and they will be the key thread of mutual understanding becomes tolerance for each other. On the page hofstedeinsights.com, I compare indicators in 6 dimensions of different countries. Ukraine with Poland, Russia, Slavic neighbors, and Britain, called pragmatists. As we can see, the first dimension, the indicators of Ukraine and Russia are almost identical, high and established social equality. The situation is slightly better in Poland and 3 times better in Britain. Ukraine's society lags behind in individualism and masculinity, and Poland's high indicators explain why everything is fine there with economic growth because, according to Hofstede, high masculinity is dominance of success, perseverance, and competitiveness. In the fourth dimensions, we see Slavic solidarity, fair on uncertain future. History has passed through our terrain so many times there is nothing surprising. Isolated by the sea, Britain clearly stands out here. And the fifth dimension, Ukraine showed the most programmatic results. According to Hofstede, Ukrainians believe that everything depends on the situation, context, and time. And Ukrainians are characterized by the ability to adapt traditions to changed conditions. And finally, in the sixth dimensions, we are most restrained society of the four. It is for later. It is not time for fun. It's about Ukrainians. The British are another thing. Also, they manage to combine pleasure and hard work. Of course, Hofstede's research should not be taken at face value, but there is a grain of rationality in his conclusions. Thus, no matter how diverse and comprehensive their definition of the concept of culture, we can ardently say only there is no culture, correct or incorrect, inherited or congenital, a sign of individual behavior within each ethnic culture. There is a wide range of individual values and behavior options. Each person retains several layers of cultural programming. So let us conclude that culture. First, this is a common collective system of values. Culture dictates that draw the attention of groups of people. It defines the feeling of the world, self-perception, and organization of life itself. Each person brings with him learned and acquired means of finding meaning in his experiences. Culture is something that is in morals, laws, and customs, shapes behavior and structures the personal perception of the world. The second, the phenomenon is relative. There is no absolute culture. Different cultures experience the world in different ways and have different ways of behaving. And now there is a standard set of properties on the basis of which one group can be considered quality superior or inferior to another group. The phenomenon is acquired set. Culture is acquired from the social environment, not transmitted genetically. The elders in the group strive pass it into the young people. The fourth, a group phenomenon. Culture is the collective phenomenon, values and meaning common to all group members. Whatever definitions or explanation of culture is chosen, that all have one thing in common. They are all based on personal experience and experiences of today's life. This is the best way to prove and find out something about culture. To understand different types of culture, researchers need direct observation and experience, as well as managers, if they want to work in the international arena, achieve success. Managers often view culture as a collective programming of the mind that distinguishes members of one group of people from another. An interacting set of shared characteristics that influence how a group of people respond to its environment. Gerd Hofstede explains that culture lies somewhere between human nature on the one hand and individual personality on another. The figure below shows the three levels in human mental programming according to Hofstede. In general, we see in people representatives of other cultures if the ways of their activities as a group and are significantly different from each other. Each person returns several layers of cultural programming. This process begins in childhood, when a child learns basic values. What is right and wrong, good and bad, logical and illogical, beautiful and ugly. This primary layer of culture is the deepest and will change according to the culture in which we grow. Many psychologists think that a person's basic value begin to form around the age of 10, and it's not easy to change them. Other levels of culture are learned or programmed in the process of education, mastering a profession or craft, and in the process of functioning in the workplace. Some of the aspects of the culture studied later relate to convention and ethics in the profession. These levels involve ways of behaving or accepted practices rather than fundamental ideas about the nature of things. All these aspects are present on the slide in the form of diagram. For your attention, the first case regarding the role of traditions and their consideration by the managers by solving the issue of cultural programming. As an example of what mistakes management can make if one does not take into account the specifics of the foreign markets. There is Euro Disney in Paris, France. Disney management clearly ignored many important issues that they themselves should have raised before launching this project. One such mistake was also related to the cultural aspects. For example, Euro Disney prohibits the consumption of alcoholic beverages in the park. French visitors were particularly confused by this, as drinking wine with food is typical of French culture. Later, this rule was changed, but the cultural tradition of the French people were not taken into account. The next case is called Cosmetic Giants, Japan and Self-Tanning Lotion. Japan has a cult of the pale face as a standard of female beauty. This cultural attitude was not taken into account by the global giants of the beauty industry, who in the early 2000s, when there was a fashion for a tanned face in Europe, decided to fill all the shelves of Japan with tanning cream. As a result, the goods were not purchased and the companies suffered losses. And the last case is innocent wrapping of candy boxes for export to the Emirates. To begin with, I want to say that you will no longer find such marketing mistakes on candy packages. But in 1999, a confectionery factory in my city signed a contract with Emirates to export candies. The candies were very tasty, but the packaging was disappointing. The name of the candies is Visit, where the cover of the designer's idea featured a visit of a lover to his chosen one. The woman's pose, her clothes, and man's hand kiss on the wrapper were seen as an affront to Emirate culture. This batch of candies were refused and demanded to replace the packaging design with another one. So, in general, cultural diversity should be taken into account. The most common reaction to it's the desire of people, one way or another, to avoid adapting to it. The natural human reaction is to accept differences. We either insist on similarities and demand that people be like us, or we deny differences, preferring not to see them even then they exist. It is much more convenient to think that your own culture is all you need to know and that nothing can be better then it's to accept a more risky opens to the differences of other cultures. As a result, we have typical reactions on unfamiliar cultures, such as complaint, groan, and embrace, and not very good result of intolerant reactions, presumption of superiority, localism or parochialism, assumption of commonality, and ethnocentrism. Presumption of superiority, universal reaction to disagreements in cultures. Of course, they are different, but we are better. Such a reaction ignores differences, making them insignificant compared to one's own culture. Most cultures consider their own values and customs to be better than the values and traditions of other people of the world. Localism or parochialism means looking at the world exclusively through the prism of one's own views and perspectives. Our way of life and our values are the best and only possible. Everything else does not even deserve attention as something underdeveloped and imperfect. A person with a narrow perspective does not recognize the existence of the other people's approaches to the life and work that different from his own, or not the fact that difference can serious consequences. People in all cultures are limited to some extent. Recently, journalists, politicians, and managers have been anonymous in their condemnation. The parochialism of Americans is one of the example. Americans speak fewer foreign languages, show less interest in understanding other cultures, and are more helpless in international business situations than most of their trading partners. In the book Unavailable American, United States Congressman Paul Simon lamented the ignorance of USA citizens in the field of foreign languages and emphasized that Americans pay dearly for it in diplomacy, commerce, economy, and culture. The next, ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is a person's evaluation of all other cultures based on how similar they are to his own culture, which is perceived as correct, normal, and better than all others. Business organizations that have proven that they can succeed in one culture often adopt an eccentric attitude. We know how to make it work for us at home, so we can make it work for us anywhere. Of course, learning another culture takes time, efforts, and resources, and it's much easier for an organization to act from an eccentric position. But unfortunately, such a position can cost her very dearly. Remember the Euro Disney in Paris. The development model of intercultural sensitivity, which was created by Dr. Milton Bennett as a framework for explaining how people perceive and engage with cultural differences, provides a better understanding of value judgments and cultural responses. The assumption underlying the model is that as one perceptual organization of different cultures becomes more complex, one's experience of culture becomes more sophisticated, and potential for applying competence in intercultural relation increases. More or less familiarities with certain cultures does not change the level of sensitivity. Also, it does affect the breadth of competence that can be applied. The continuum extends from ethnocentrism, the experience of one's own culture as central to reality, to ethnorelativism, the experience of one's own and other cultures as contextual. And the last reaction, assumption of commonality. You can often hear the comment from travelers who have returned from abroad. Maybe they speak, dress, eat differently, but in essence, they are the same as us. However, this comment is deeply flawed and potentially dangerous. People are essentially not alike, because culture is a holistic, generalized view of the universe based on which people evaluate the meaning of life and their behavior. They begin to operate in different operational environments, manage different software, have different database, and process information in different ways. So let's move on the analysis of interaction with other cultures. In figure in front of you shows different scenarios according to which our views on life develop depending on the culture with which we try to relate them. It's hard to judge people by how they look. Most businessmen dress the same. It's only when we say or do something that other people can understand how we live. Our actions or what can be described as a cultural manifestation or even because they can a reflection of our cultural goals. Even Italian is half an hour late for an international business meeting. In his own culture, will not cause any indignation. Others behave in the same way. However, in Germany, this behavior will cause a culture shock with serious consequences. Germans will be outraged even if they are made to wait for 3 minutes. The situation will provoke their immediate irritation and protests, which will force the Italian to defend himself. The resultant confrontation is that lead to a breakdown in relations. In a closer culture, say French, criticism of the behavior of Italians will also be quite harsh, but will be expressed in less categorical and accusatory form. The next time, in response to the rebuke of the French, the Italian will be only 20 minutes late, while the French, who no longer expect punctuality from him, will be much more tolerant. In this example, I define culture shock as a phenomenon that occurs during the transition from the one culture to another. It is one of the inevitable experience in the process immersion in a new unfamiliar culture. It is important to know that culture shock and its symptoms are normal and expected in cross-cultural situations. Culture shock is the accompanying sense of disorganization, physiological and even physical problems, which are caused by the stress of trying to arrange one's life in a foreign culture. The existence of cultural shocks caused by the emergence of natural person's desire to adapt to a foreign culture. Scientists in turn studied and developed various models of adaptation. The first of them is the theory of adaptation, a long U-shaped curve by Sverre Lysgaard, states that adaptation occurs along a U-shaped curve. This curve was defined by Sverre Lysgaard in 1955 and describes the stage of adjustment people go through when living in a new culture. And I want to add that this curve is one of the most studied curves in the world. The interpretation of culture shock curve present on this slide. As you see, it will be 4 phases. The first, honeymoon phase. This initial stage is characterized by excitement and curiosity. Individuals are often fascinated by the new environment and eager to explore. Everything is novel and captivating. The next, it will be culture shock. As the novelty fades, individuals may feel overwhelmed, anxious, and confused. They encounter differences in daily life, communication, and social norms that can be disoriented. The third phase, adjustment phase. During this phase, individuals begin to adapt to a new culture. They develop coping mechanisms and strategies to handle challenges, gradually feeling more comfortable and competent in their new environment. And the last phase, adaptation. Individuals have successfully adjusted to their new surrounding. In the final phase, they feel more at ease in the host culture and may develop a sense of belonging and connection. But typical expat life cycles that will be present on this slide have been flipped in the case of expat curve in raw edition. So the first phase will be integration, about mobilization of internal strengths, resources, high level of motivation. The next phase will be in raw edition is emotional stability and recovery. The third phase, it will be shock. For example, if we have comparison with typical expat life cycle, it will be a story about shock in the sad phase. But in situation with expat curve, it will be the sad phase about feeling of isolation and the detachment from society, the light effect of sudden relocation. And the last, honeymoon, understanding of perspective of a new country, full awareness and readiness to integrate. The next models of culture shock is the anxiety and uncertainty management model by William Gudykunst. He considered uncertainty the key to managing intercultural relationship. The purpose of communication is to reduce uncertainty and anxiety it causes. Uncertainty is predictions can be caused by the impossibility of predicting how another culture will react to a particular situation or behavior. Uncertainty in explanation is caused by the inability to explain why a culture reacts in the way it does. This model helps us understand how we adapt to a new scene's cultural context with reduced uncertainty and anxiety. The third model is the models of culture shock of transition by Bennett. The transition model, Bennett talks about cultural shock as a category that is included in the broader concept of transition shock and includes various transition periods such as aging, which also leads to similar crisis and shock. The main thesis of the transitional period model is that all transitional periods involve loss and change. The perception of the new first of the old implies and loss of the old. Fight or go away. According to this slogan, most people react to sudden transition or to new situations. They either avoid them or fight against visible threats. Such reaction will be helpful and productive, but in their more extreme form can be hostile and destructive. And the last models of culture shock is communication system model by Yang Kim. She posits that stress and anxiety contribute to adaptation and ultimately development. This process takes place through communication. Communication facilitates adaptation, but it can also increase culture shock because it increases opportunity for exposure to another culture. And her model presented on this slide, as you see, becoming intercultural, an integrity theory of communication and cross-cultural adaptation on the slide. So culture shock is a question of intercultural competence. Intercultural competence includes such elements as knowledge, behaviors, such as ability to communicate, awareness of distance, synergy awareness, target organization, and different emotions, empathy, tolerance, flexibility, and others. So the equation of intercultural competence is a guarantee of the formation of successful organizational culture. We shall take into account both visible things as communication, reaction, performance, interaction, socialization, and teamwork, and others below the surface and not visible, beliefs, values, perceptions, attitudes, expectations, and assumptions. Diversity of organizational culture describes a workplace that includes people from various backgrounds and cultures, diverse businesses. So for comparisons, we can summarize that harness diversity include involve environment, facilitate cross pollination of ideas, and create cross-functional teams. And as a result, we will have some benefits as inspires innovations, brings different frames of reference to a problem, and enhances creativity. As a result, we have a question: how to organize work in such an organizational culture of an international company? Some funny joke said that Muslims don't work on Friday, Jews on Saturday, Christians on Sunday. Someone invent a religion to not work on Monday. So if we want to embrace cultural difference at work, we must at first adapt communication styles as needed. Learn about your employers and their backgrounds. host diversity training organized, and acknowledge holidays and celebration, because all cultural difference must be taken into account and will have some tolerance to another cultures too. Some comparison between national culture and an organizational culture presents this slide. So national culture will be core is focused on values, followed by strong emotions and difference in individual values. National culture is slow changing and depends on how individuals relate to each other based on their values and distinguish individuals from one another. At the same time, organizational culture COIL is focused on practices, followed by more tangible and reasonable practices such as COIL and objective settings. Focus in more tangible so it can be faster changing than in national culture. Depends on how members of an organization relate to their work, each other and outside world. And it includes some element as distinguish organization from another. Finally, we can summarize 10 principles of organization culture that will be guarantee of its effectiveness. The first, work within your current cultural situation. Second, change behaviors. Third, focus on few critical behaviors. Deploy authentic informal leaders. Keep your formal leaders in check. The next, demonstrate impact quickly. Don't forget connect behaviors to organizational objectives. To go viral, utilize cross-organizational methods. Align behaviors with programmatic efforts. And the last, proactively manage the cultural situation over time and especially in long-term perspectives. So in this topic, we try to find out why the question of intercultural management are of such great importance for modern organization. Culture as a fundamental concept is defined as consistent, relative, and quiet and collective phenomenon. We have described 3 levels of human mental programming and typical human reaction on informal cultures, such as assumption of superiority, ethnocentrism, and assumption of commonality. We also considered the importance of self-knowledge and the concept of ethnoculturalism as effective ways to understand other cultures. We covered the problem of interaction with other cultures, including culture shock and reverse culture shock, exist models of adaptation, introduce the concept of cultural juggle and business culture. Thank you all for your attention. For now, I have a small task for you. It's to pass a small quiz. It will take you up to 1 minute. This quiz will show you what traits are necessary to ensure international orientation. Take this test to find out what your strengths are. It's only for fun. So you can use this QR code, and after the quiz I please you to post your result in the chat of Discord channel number 3 cultural programming applications, and then we have a break, after which we will meet again.